I always thought our marriage was unbreakable until I discovered Emily's secret. She didn't come home after a Christmas party. And when I traced her steps, I found a nightclub surveillance video revealing her intimate behavior with the strange men. This footage not only shattered my trust but also completely overturned my worldview. I remember the day. My life began to unravel as if it happened yesterday. It was a cold December evening, just a week after Emily's office Christmas party. She worked as a senior account manager at a financial firm, a position she took pride in and spoke about often. Her company had rented out a trendy nightclub down for their annual celebration, and Emily had been excited about it for weeks at first. It seemed like any other work event. Emily spent the day leading up to it, meticulously preparing. She tried on several dresses, asking for my opinion on each one. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I suspected she already knew which one she wanted to wear. She settled on a sleek emerald green dress that hugged her figure perfectly. She looked stunning, like she had stepped out of a magazine watching her that night. I couldn't shake a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something felt off. Emily sprayed on a new perfume, checked her reflection in the mirror one last time, and kissed me. "Goodbye. Don't wait up," she said with a smile, her tone light and casual. I nodded, brushing off the unease that had been creeping over me all day. I convinced myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild after all. We had a strong marriage or so, I thought. While Emily was out, I stayed home with our daughter, Sophie. We spent the evening decorating the Christmas tree, stringing up lights and playing board games. It was a cozy, quiet night, the kind I cherished. After putting Sophie to bed, I settled in with a book, expecting Emily to return home before long. But as the hours ticked by, my worry began to grow at midnight. I called her, trying to sound casual. The music blasting in the background made it hard to hear her. She said the party was still going strong and that she'd be home later. Her tone was dismissive, almost rushed, and something about it unsettled me. There was a hesitation in her voice that didn't sit right with me. When she finally came through the door, the next evening, disheveled and reeking of alcohol, I felt my heart sink. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smudged, and she looked exhausted. It was obvious she hadn't come straight home from the party when I asked where she had been. She muttered something about drinking too much and crack was in her colleague's place. She offered no details, no names, just a vague apology and an awkward silence. Emily quickly changed out of her dress and headed straight to the shower. I stayed in the living room, replaying the conversation in my head. Something didn't add up as I heard the water running. I felt a strange urge to check her discarded clothes. I wasn't proud of it, but my instincts wouldn't let me sit still. I found her dress in the laundry basket, along with her bra, but something was missing: her panties. I searched through the pile of clothes. Again, my heart racing. Nothing. It was such a small thing, but it felt monumental. Why would she come home without them? I couldn't ignore the red flag waving in my face. When Emily emerged from the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel, I decided to probe her gently. "How was the party?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She barely looked at me as she responded. "It was fine. You know how these things are. A lot of drinking, silly games. I crashed at Amanda's place, since it was closer to the club." Her voice was too smooth, too rehearsed. I could tell she was holding something back, but instead of pressing her, I decided to bide my time. If I confronted her, then she would have denied everything, and I would have been left feeling like a paranoid fool. No, I needed more information. Something concrete. The name of the nightclub lingered in my mind, and I decided to follow my instincts. The next day, I took a personal day from work and drove to the club. It was a sleek, modern building in the heart of downtown, surrounded by busy streets and bustling cafes. As I stood outside, staring at its imposing glass facade, my mind raced with questions. What had really happened that night? I stepped inside, pretending to be interested in the property as a potential buyer. I introduced myself as a real estate agent and spun a story about a client looking for investment opportunities. The manager gave me a polite but slightly puzzled tour. I tried to act casual, asking questions about the building's layout and security features. That's when I noticed the cameras. They were positioned discreetly around the club, covering most of the interior. My heart leapt. If those cameras had been running during the Christmas party, there might be footage that could confirm or disprove my suspicions after the tour. I thanked the manager and returned to my car, my mind spinning. How was I going to get my hands on that footage? As I stood there, lost in thought, I accidentally bumped into someone. What? Watch it, the man barked, irritated. I froze. That voice sounded familiar. Looking up, I realized I had run into Jake.
An old friend from college?
We hadn't seen each other in years. Jake, it's me. Alex, I said, forcing a smile, despite the turmoil inside me. Alex. Damn. Man, it has been ages. How are you? His annoyed expression softened into a warm smile. After a few pleasantries, I asked, You work here? Yeah. I'm one of the managers, he said with a shrug. Not exactly where I thought I'd end up, but it pays the bills. This was my chance. Hey, let's grab a coffee and catch up, I suggested. He agreed, and we met at a cafe across the street. As we talked, I learned that Jake was going through a tough time. His mom's medical bills had drained his savings, and he had been bouncing from job before landing at the club. He looked worn down, a shadow of the ambitious guy I remembered from college. After catching up, I decided to get to the point. Jake, I need your help, I said, lowering my voice. Emily was at your club for her office Christmas party, and I think something happened. I need to see the security footage from that night. Jake's face tensed. Alex, that's a big ask. If I get caught pulling footage, I could lose my job. I leaned in, my desperation clear. This is my marriage. We're talking about I can't live with these doubts. If I'm wrong, I'll let it go. But if I'm right, my voice trailed off. Jake hesitated, torn between loyalty and the risk I was asking him to take. I decided to sweeten the deal. I slid $5 across the table and promised another $700. Once he got me the footage, I also offered to help him find a better job, leveraging my contacts in real estate and finance. After a long pause, he sighed. All right, I'll do it. But if anything goes wrong, I'm out. You understand? I nodded, grateful. Thank you, Jake. You have no idea how much this means to me. A few days later, Jake texted me the footage as I sat at the kitchen table with the flash drive in my hand. My palms were sweating. I inserted it into my laptop, my heart racing as I clicked. Play the screen lit up with footage from the party, and my life would never be the same as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flash drive in my hand. A wave of apprehension washed over me. My palms were clammy, my heart pounding in my chest. This small device held the answers I had been dreading, yet desperately needed. With a deep breath, I inserted the flash drive into my laptop and clicked on the first video file. The screen lit up with footage of the nightclub, the Christmas party, in full swing. Bright lights flashed across the room and music vibrated through the shaky camera movements. People were dancing, laughing, and drinking all the hallmarks of a festive office party. At first glance, everything seemed innocent enough, but my gut told me to keep watching. I spotted Emily almost immediately. She looked stunning in an emerald green dress, her smile dazzling as she moved through the crowd. She laughed and chatted with her colleagues, raising her glass in a toast. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I had been overthinking everything. Maybe this was just a harmless night out, and I had let my insecurities get the better of me. But as the footage continued, my unease grew. Emily's demeanor started to shift. She wasn't just mingling anymore. She was drinking more, laughing louder, listening thirst-eyed, and leaning in closer to the people. She was talking to the carefree way. She touched the man's arm, the playful flick of her hair. It all felt too familiar, too intimate. My chest tightened as I watched her move from one conversation to the next, her charm on full display. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. Emily was dancing with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall with dark hair and a confident smile. At first, their movements were casual, playful, even. But as the song went on, their bodies drew closer together. His hands rested on her hips, and she didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned into him, her smile growing wider. My jaw clenched as I watched them laugh and sway together, the rest of the crowd fading into the background. They looked like a couple, not colleagues. The way she gazed up at him, the way he whispered something in her ear, that made her laugh. It was more than friendly as the footage progressed. Emily and the man disappeared into the corner of the club, where the cameras didn't have full coverage. My heart sank. I stared at the empty frame, my mind racing with what could be happening just out of view when they reappeared. Minutes later, Emily's hair was slightly tousled and she was adjusting her dress. The man followed behind her, grinning, like he had just won the lottery. I felt sick, but the nightmare wasn't over yet. Later, in the footage, Emily was seen with another man. This one shorter with a stocky build. She hugged him tightly, her arms around his neck as they swayed to the music. It was a repeat of what I had just witnessed. She flirted openly, her smile electric as he leaned in. Close at one point, he whispered something to her, and she threw her head back, laughing. Then to my horror, the two men appeared together. They exchanged glances and said something to Emily, who smiled. Coil why? Before taking each of their hands and leading them back toward the same shadowy corner. My stomach twisted into knots. The implications were undeniable. I wanted to stop watching, to close the laptop and pretend this wasn't real, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I needed to see the truth, no matter how much it hurt. When Emily and the men re-emerged, the signs were impossible to miss. Her hair was a mess, her dress disheveled. She was adjusting the straps and smoothing out the fabric, clearly trying to compose herself. One of the men had a triumphant grin, while the other looked smug. Then I saw it, a flash of red lace peeking out of one man's pocket. Her panties. There was no mistaking it. I paused the footage, my hands trembling. The room felt like it was closing in around me. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was something far worse. A complete disregard for everything we had built together. The image of Emily's smile, so full of life and joy, now felt like a painful reminder. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the screen, the damning image frozen in place. A part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to scream, to demand answers. But other part of me knew it wouldn't matter. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I needed to calm down, to think clearly. Confronting her in anger would only escalate things. Instead, I decided to gather more information. If Emily thought she could keep this secret, she was sorely mistaken. The next day, while Emily was out running errands, I went through her phone. She had always been careless about leaving it unlocked. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Photos from the party. Most of them were innocent group shots with her colleagues. But then I found a series of pictures that made my blood boil. There she was standing between the two men from the footage, her arms draped around their shoulders in one photo. The taller man had his hand on her waist, while the shorter one leaned in, close, his lips grazing her cheek. The three of them looked like they were having the time of their lived lives. I noted their names from the captions and started digging within hours. I had tracked down their social media profiles and discovered that both men were married. Their wives looked like ordinary happy women, blissfully unaware of what their husbands had been up to. I debated whether to contact them directly. It felt wrong to bring others into this mess, but I couldn't ignore the thought that they deserved to know the truth. Just as I did, I decided to reach out, cautiously, sending a polite but urgent message to each woman. I explained who I was, what I had discovered, and offered to meet in person to discuss it further. To my surprise, both responded quickly, agreeing to meet me. The meetings were as painful as I expected. Both women were shocked, their faces pale as I laid out the evidence. I showed them the screenshots, The photos and described what I had seen on the footage. At first, they struggled to believe it. But as the truth sank in, their disbelief turned to anger. "This can't be real," one of them said, her voice trembling. He said he was working late that night. "I thought he was just blowing off steam with the guys." The other added, tears streaming down her face. "How could he do this to me?" I felt a pang of guilt for being the bearer of such devastating news. But I also knew it was the right thing to do. These women deserved to know the truth, just as I had. I encouraged them to contact my lawyer and offered to help in any way I could. If their husbands were going to destroy their marriages, they wouldn't get away unscathed. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief at having taken action, but also a deep aching sadness. The life I had known was overshadowed by Emily's betrayal. There was no going back. Now all that remained was to confront her and start the process of moving on. But I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. She had made her choices, and now she would face them. The drive home after speaking to the wives of the men from the footage was surreal. My thoughts raced as I tried to prepare myself for the next step. Confronting Emily felt inevitable, but I couldn't afford to lose control. It wasn't just about my anger or heartbreak. It was about taking back control of my life. When I got home, the house was quiet. Emily was out, probably running errands or visiting a friend. Her absence gave me time to think, to plan exactly how I'd approach her. I went to my study, placed the flash drive on the desk, and opened my laptop. The footage was still there, waiting, like a loaded gun. I reviewed it one last time, ensuring every detail was burned into my memory. The anger bubbled up again as I watched Emily's carefree smile, her reckless abandon as she kissed and danced with those men. But this time, the anger didn't consume me. It focused me. I knew exactly what I needed to do that evening. Emily came home, her cheerful demeanor as infuriating as ever. She set her purse on the counter, kissed me on the cheek, and asked how my day had been. I answered casually, masking the storm brewing inside me. I waited until after dinner, when Sophie was asleep, before making my move. "Emily, can we talk?" I said, my tone calm but firm. She looked at me, her smile faltering slightly. "Sure, what's up?" I motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table where I had the divorce papers neatly stacked. I sat across from her, my hands resting on the table to steady myself. "I know," I said, simply. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "Know what I know about the Christmas party. I know what you did, and I have proof." The color drained from her face as she stared at me. "Alex, what are you talking about? You're not making any sense." I opened my laptop and played the footage. Her eyes widened as the scenes unfolded. The dancing, the kissing, the moments in the shadowy corner. She clutched the edge of the table, her face a mixture of shock and terror. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is that I know the truth, and I'm done." She reached for the laptop as if trying to shut it or take it away, but I pulled it back. "Don't bother. I've made copies," I said, coldly. "Alex, please let me explain," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "It wasn't what it like. I was drunk and I didn't know what I was doing. It was a mistake. A mistake," I repeated, my voice rising. "Drinking too much is a mistake. Forgetting to call is a mistake. This wasn't a mistake, Emily. This was a deliberate choice. You didn't just betray me. You humiliated me," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Emily. Sorry doesn't erase what you did. I trusted you and you threw it all away." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I'll do anything to make it right. Please, Alex, don't give up on us. There is no us anymore," I said, sliding the divorce papers across the table. "You're going to sign these. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what happened. Your family, your friends, even your colleagues. I'll show them the footage." Do you want that? Her sobbing intensified as she realized the weight of her actions. You don't mean that, she said weakly. Try me, I replied, my voice steady. She hesitated, her hands trembling as she picked up the papers. I could see the defeat in her eyes. As she realized she had no choice, she signed each page, in silence, her tears smudging the ink in places. When it was done, I gathered the papers and stood up. You can keep the house, I said, surprising, even myself. I'll move out, but I'm taking Sophie with me. Emily's head shot up. You can't take her, she said, her voice breaking. She's my daughter too. And you'll see her, I said, but not as much as you used to. I'm going to make sure of that. She stared at me, defeated and broken. How did it come to this? She whispered. You made your choices. Emily, I said, turning to leave. Now you have to live with them. That night, I packed a bag and left the house. I stayed with a friend for a few days, while my lawyer finalized the paperwork. The divorce was straightforward, thanks to the evidence I had. Emily didn't fight me on custody, knowing full well that the footage would ruin her chances in court. I moved into a small apartment not far from Sophie's school. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I focused on creating a stable environment for her, shielding her from the chaos as much as possible. She was my priority. Now as for Emily, I heard from mutual friends that she was struggling. Her reputation at work had taken a hit, and her family distanced themselves. After learning the truth, the men from the party faced their own consequences. Their wives had taken action, and the fallout was as messy as I had anticipated. It wasn't revenge I sought. Not anymore. It was closure. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had it. But life has a way of surprising you. Just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, a chance encounter would remind me that even in the darkest moments, there's a glimmer of hope. After leaving the house and settling into my new apartment, life felt different. A mix of clarity and exhaustion. It wasn't the kind of fresh start I'd imagined years ago, but it was a necessary one. The first few weeks were consumed by logistics, finding furniture, setting up Sophie's room, and working out a routine that would give her stability. Despite everything that had happened, I was determined to shield her from the turmoil as much as possible. Sophie was a bright, curious 8-year-old, and I could tell she sensed something had changed. She didn't ask many questions, but her quiet moments spoke volumes. One evening, while we were unpacking boxes, she finally broke her silence. Why isn't Mom coming to stay here with us? She asked, her small voice tinged with confusion. I paused, setting down a box of kitchenware. Mom and I decided it's best if we live in different places for now, I said carefully. It doesn't change how much we both love you. That will never change. She nodded, slowly, her eyes downcast. But you're not mad at me, right? My heart broke. I knelt down to her level and took her hands in mine. Sophie, this has nothing to do with you. None of this is your fault. You're the most important person in the world to me, and I'll always be here for you. Okay. Her lip quivered and she nodded again. Before wrapping her arms around me, I held her tightly, silently, promising myself that I would do everything in my power to make her feel safe and loved. With Sophie's reassurance in mind, I poured my energy into creating a sense of normalcy. I threw myself into my work as a real estate agent, picking up extra clients and dedicating long hours to closing deals. The routine kept my mind occupied and gave me a sense of purpose. It also helped me avoid dwelling on Emily and the fallout from her betrayal. But there were moments I couldn't escape it. One afternoon, as I scrolled through my phone during a lunch break, a message popped up from Emily. It was simple, almost casual. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back about what her response came quickly. Us. Everything. I just need to explain. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her stew in the consequences of her actions. But another part of me, the part that still sought closure, decided it was worth hearing her out. We agreed to meet at a neutral place, a quiet cafe near her office. When I arrived, Emily was already there. sitting at a corner table with a coffee cup in her hands. She looked different. Tired, worn out, and a little older. Her once bright eyes now carried a heaviness I hadn't seen before. "Thanks for coming," she said softly as I sat down. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She took a deep breath, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how much I regret what I did." I watched her carefully, searching for sincerity in her words. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not come clean before everything fell apart?" She hesitated, then shrugged, helplessly. I was scared. I thought I could bury it, pretend it didn't happen. But I couldn't. And now I've lost everything. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked down, blinking back. Tears. I felt a flicker of pity, but quickly pushed it aside. "You didn't lose everything, Emily. You threw it away. There's a difference." She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "You're right. I deserve that. I just hope that someday you can think of me as more than the person who hurt you." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let the silence hang between us. Finally, I said, "I don't know what the future holds, Emily, but right now, I need to focus on Sophie and moving forward. That's all I care about." She nodded again, accepting my words, without argument. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly before standing to leave. I watched her walk away, feeling a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and closure. The chapter with Emily was finally closing, and I was ready to turn the page. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new normal. Sophie adapted to the changes better than I had expected. Her resilience, a constant source of inspiration. She thrived at school, made new friends, and even started taking piano lessons, a hobby she'd begged for over the past year. Seeing her smile and laugh reminded me of what truly mattered. Work flourished as well. I landed a few major clients and began making a name for myself in the local real estate market. My focus and determination didn't go unnoticed, and I started getting referrals from satisfied clients for the first time in a long while. I felt like I was rebuilding something meaningful. Then, one evening, as I was picking Sophie up from a birthday party, I ran into someone unexpected. Her name was Grace, and she was the mother of one of Sophie's classmates. We had seen each other in passing at school events, but this was the first time we had a real conversation. Grace was warm, kind and easy to talk to. She asked how Sophie was settling into her new routine, and we ended up chatting for longer than I anticipated. By the time the party was over, I found myself looking forward to seeing her again. Over the next few weeks, we crossed paths, more often at school, drop-offs, soccer games, and even the grocery store. Each encounter felt natural and forced. Grace had a way of making me laugh, of reminding me that life could be light-hearted and joyful. Again, one Saturday, while the kids were playing at a park, Grace and I sat on a bench, watching them from a distance. "You seem happier lately," she said, her tone gentle. I smiled, realizing she was right. "I think I'm finally starting to let go of the past." I admitted it hasn't been easy, but I'm getting there. She nodded, her own smile, soft and understanding it shows as I sat there with Grace. The weight of the last few months began to lift for the first time. I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was living again, and it was a feeling I didn't want to let go. Of the weeks that followed were some of the most peaceful I had experienced in years. Life was no longer clouded by the shadow of betrayal or the chaos of the divorce. Instead, it was filled with quiet, meaningful moments. Moments helping Sophie with her school projects, catching up on long-neglected hobbies, and allowing myself to embrace the small joys of daily life. CLA became a regular presence, not just in Sophie's life, but in mine as well. Our interactions grew from casual chats to deeper conversations, and before long, we were spending time together. Outside of school functions, she had a warmth and patience that made me feel comfortable being vulnerable for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel the need to keep my guard up. One evening, as Sophie was playing at Grace's house with her son, the two of us sat on her back porch, with a couple of glasses of wine. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard, and the sound of the children laughing in the distance filled the air. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Celia said, breaking the silence. "But how are you doing? Really?" I paused, swirling the wine in my glass as I thought about her question better than I expected. I admitted, there were times when I thought I'd never get past the anger, the hurt, but now I feel lighter. Like I can finally breathe again. She smiled, her eyes full of understanding. "You've been through a lot, Alex. It's okay to take your time, figuring things out." I nodded, appreciating her kindness. "What about you? How are you holding up?" Grace had been open about her own struggles as a single mother, having gone through a divorce a few years earlier. Her ex-husband had moved across the country, leaving her to navigate parent her own. "It's not always easy," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But I've learned to focus on what matters, my son, my friends, the little victories. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it." Her words resonated with me for so long. I had been consumed by the pain of what Emily had done, the betrayal that shattered our life together. But sitting here with Grace, I realized that those moments no longer defined me. I was more than the hurt I had endured over time. Grace and I grew closer. It started with small gestures, a thoughtful text, an invitation to dinner, a shared laugh over something silly. The kids did eventually. Those moments turned into something deeper. One night as we stood by my car, after a school event, I found myself unable to hold back any longer. "Grace," I said, my voice steady, but soft. "I know this might sound sudden, but I feel like I can finally see a future again. And when I picture it, you're in it." Her eyes widened slightly, and then a warm smile spread across her face. "Alex, I felt the same way for a while now," she admitted. "I didn't want to rush you, but I'm glad you feel the same." That night marked the beginning of something new. It wasn't just about finding love again. It was about finding someone who valued honesty, kindness, and growth. Grace wasn't a replacement for what I had lost. She was a reminder of what I deserved. Meanwhile, Emily's life had taken a turn for the worse. Mutual friends told me that she had lost her job after her personal life became the subject of workplace gossip. Her family, embarrassed by the scandal, had distanced themselves from her. She reached out a few times, apologizing and asking for another chance. But I was firm. The damage was done, and I wasn't interested in revisiting the past for Sophie's sake. I maintained a cordial relationship with Emily, allowing her regular visitation, but I made it clear that my focus was on providing Sophie with a stable, loving environment. Emily seemed to understand. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I could tell it hurt her to see the life she had thrown away as the months turned into a year. My life continued to improve. My real estate business flourished, and I found fulfillment in helping clients find their dream homes. Sophie excelled in school. Her smile, a constant source of joy, and Grace became an integral part of our lives, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of our little family. One evening, as I watched Sophie and Grace's son playing in the yard, I realized how far I had come. The pain and betrayal that once consumed me now felt like a distant memory, a chapter I had closed. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine and it was good. I looked over at Grace, who was sitting beside me on the porch, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Thank you," I said quietly. She turned to me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "For what?" "For reminding me that life goes on," I said. "For showing me that it's okay to hope again." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "You've come a long way, Alex, and you deserve every bit of happiness that's coming your way." As I sat there, surrounded by laughter and love, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Life had tested me in ways I never expected, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was truly living. And it felt amazing. This was my fresh start. And I wasn't going to let anything take it away. Here's the next story. I flirted with his brother during a party. His vengeance rendered me speechless. I've been a long-time lurker on this app. Reddit has been my guilty pleasure for many years. I've laughed, cried, and even judged some of the things I've read here. But I never imagined I'd be writing my own story. Because, well, I was on the first. I really screwed up. I'm not here to excuse my conduct or portray myself as a victim. I acknowledge that I made a mistake. I'm simply hoping that by sharing this, I'll get some clarity counsel, or at least someone to tell me how I may start to fix the disaster I caused. But first, let me explain where I'm coming from. My name is Mia, and let's call my spouse Ethan. We're both 30 and have been married for 2 years. Our connection has always been strong, stable, and fantastic. We had trust and friendship, maybe not love, but I'll get to that. But it was all you could expect from a marriage or so, I thought. I'm not sure anymore. The issue is, Noah is everything a person could possibly want in a husband. He's friendly, dependable, and really patient. He's the type of man that makes you feel secure and cared for, the type of man who will never raise his voice or make you feel unloved. And I know objectively that I am extremely lucky to have him. But here's the issue with luck. It's easy to take for granted when you believe it will always be present, especially if you didn't explicitly request it in the first place. Let me clarify. I grew up alongside Ethan and his family, from next-door neighbors to high school buddies. We have known each other our entire lives. Most folks undoubtedly thought we had the own narrative. Childhood pals became lovers, the type of romance shown in films and books. But life is seldom as straightforward as it appears growing up. I always assumed I would end up with someone else. Daniel, Ethan's older brother. Daniel was the traditional heartthrob, the charming wildlife of the party type who strolled into a room and instantly became the center of attention. And me, I was the awkward girl next door with a huge, almost embarrassing crush on him. Sounds like a cliche, doesn't? It wasn't just a phase, or a transient schoolgirl crush. I was enamored with Daniel for many years. He was everything I imagined I wanted. I used to fantasize about him, recognizing me, viewing me as more than just his younger brother's awkward companion. I dropped so many hints, flirted in the most awkward manner, and even openly professed my affections more than once. But Daniel was Daniel, the playboy, the unserious one, the person who never wanted to settle down or commit to anything other than having fun. He was not interested, no matter how hard I tried. Eventually, I gave up. Perhaps I convinced myself that I had. That's when Ethan entered the picture. That's when I began to notice Ethan differently. He'd always been present, stable, and dependable, in the background, the polar opposite of his older brother, Daniel, who was wild and unpredictable. Ethan remained calm and dependable. And when Ethan expressed his affection for me, I was caught off guard. It wasn't the spectacular heart-stopping moment I'd always envisioned with Lee, but I was sick of chasing someone who didn't want me. So I decided to run with it. I thought, why not? Ethan was a great man, someone with whom I could imagine living a steady and happy life. That's how we got together. Sorry if this is turning into a huge backstory, but I need everyone to understand. I need to vent. It wasn't that I thought Ethan was inferior, or that I didn't value him. I really do. But, to be honest, I wasn't in love with him when we started dating. This is not how you should be when you marry someone. I figured it would happen eventually. People often claim that love grows correct, but looking back, I see that perhaps I never gave it a chance. And maybe that's why I'm sitting here composing this, trying to figure out how I screwed everything up. As I previously stated, I expected the love to come eventually. I genuinely believed that one day I'd wake up, look at Ethan and feel my heart expand with the passion and affection that you're supposed to have for your spouse. I mean, isn't that what everyone says? Love grows that if you have a solid foundation of trust, respect, and stability. The rest will fall into place. But the truth is, it never arrived. And looking back, I can see why I never gave it a chance to grow. Perhaps I was still clinging onto the vestiges of my affections for Daniel. Or perhaps I had convinced myself that settling for something satisfactory was the most. I could do whatever. The reason the love I expected to see never materialized. And by the time I realized it was too late to back out, Ethan had given me everything I could ever want in a relationship. The steadiness and unwavering affection. The trust. He treated me as if I were the center of his existence. I couldn't see any reason to go. Nothing was wrong with Ethan. He was, and still is an outstanding man. The problem was mine. I didn't love him. But I stayed. Because how could I leave someone who loved and treated me like Ethan did? I felt deep down that I might never find someone who would care for me like he did. Someone who would put me first, as he always did. Walking away felt like tossing away a winning lotto ticket simply because it was not my favorite color. I stayed for a while. It was easier. Daniel was not around. After Ethan and I married, we relocated to a distant location for his job and his family, including Daniel remained behind. It was like closing a chapter, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe, without worrying about what was out of sight and out of mind. Right. However, this year, everything changed. We moved back. I sincerely wish we had him. To be honest, it was meant to be a positive thing. Ethan missed being near to his family, and I agreed. Because why not? It looked like the appropriate thing to do. It is the supportive thing to do. I assured myself. I was fine. I could handle being around Daniel again. After all, it had been years. I was married now. He probably didn't recall my embarrassing crush. But the reality is that coming back brought up feelings I thought I had buried a long time ago. They were not gone. I just buried them. I shoved them into a deep dark corner of my mind and convinced myself they had been dealt with. But coming back, it popped the bottle wide open, letting everything out. And the worst part, I began to realize how much those emotions still controlled me. Even after all these years, I'm not sure whether it was regret, unresolved feelings, or something else entirely. But returning here turned my entire world upside down. I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Looking back, I believe moving back was the biggest mistake we ever did. Maybe I should have informed Ethan. We shouldn't do this. I am confident that if I had asked Ethan to stay in our old city, he would have accepted immediately. He is the type of man who will do anything to make me happy. No questions asked. Nevertheless, I remained silent. Perhaps a small part of me longed to see Daniel again. Maybe some twisted, selfish part of me thought it would be great to be near him, to see if there was still something there, even if it was just a flashback to how I used to feel. I do not know. All I know is that whatever I hoped for failed spectacularly before I knew it. I was finding fresh reasons to be with Daniel, new reasons to hang out with him, even when Ethan wasn't present. I told myself it was simply catching up after all these years, but I knew it was more than that. And in the process, I began to drift away from Ethan, albeit slowly and almost silently. I dismissed his invitation to spend time together, ignore his questions, and make reasons for why I needed to be elsewhere. However, as time passed, the distance between us widened. To be honest, I cannot properly express my own mental process. It seemed like I was completely out of control, and I didn't care about the consequences. Perhaps there was a naive, irresponsible part of me that hoped that Neil would sense my distance from Ethan and understand what it meant. Maybe I wanted him to see that I didn't want Ethan, but wanted him. I realize it sounds insane. Even as I tell this, I feel like I'm reading about another person's life. But this is the truth. I allowed myself to sink into a vicious cycle of desiring and faking, not realizing how much harm I was causing. And now, looking back, I can't help but wonder what the heck I was thinking. So what was the final screw-up that ruined everything? What was the ultimate mistake, including my own? Well, that happened during a party. My mother-in-law's birthday party, to be specific. It was a particularly significant birthday, and Daniel offered that he host it. Of course, it made sense for everyone to pitch in, and I was more than eager to assist. I jumped at the chance to work alongside Daniel and date him. The party was fantastic. Everyone was present. We got all out. I should have concentrated on my husband that night, but instead, I was drawn to Daniel, like a moth to a flame. I'm not sure what came over me that night. And now, I can't blame alcohol. Perhaps I'd had 1 or 2 glasses of wine, but I wasn't intoxicated. I can't use that as an excuse. The truth is that I sought the attention I desired. It soaked it in like a sponge. When Daniel admired my clothing, my heart skipped a beat. He also laughed at my jokes. I felt like I was the funniest and most charming person in the room. It was intoxicating. It was everything I had secretly desired for years. I had always hoped to receive validation from him. So I leaned into it. I laughed a little too much at his jokes. A chuckle that is both loud and long. I touched his arm. Unnecessarily. I'd even let my hand rest there for a little longer than required. I toyed with my hair, adjusted my jewelry, and made all those small gestures. That screamed, "Look at me." It was evident. It's painfully evident. Even now, I cringe, just thinking about it. I angled my head just right. When he spoke, I continued finding excuses to stand beside him. I practically radiated PYGM energy. Those were just a handful of the stupid, irresponsible things I did that evening. But here's the thing. I had no idea how horrible it was. At the time, I was so focused on the attention and the validation that I didn't notice how it looked. Or perhaps I didn't care. In any case, I ignored the one individual who noticed everything. Ethan, my husband, saw everything. However, he did not confront me right away. He did not pull me aside or cause a scene. No, he waited. I didn't realize it at the time, but Ethan had decided the best way to handle the problem was not to talk to me about it, to quarrel, or to demand an explanation. He did not say anything about what he had observed because of this. I honestly assumed he hadn't noticed, or at the very least that he wasn't interested enough to make a big deal about it. I interpreted his silence as in not noticing, which, in retrospect, was my first major mistake. A few weeks after the party, something unexpected occurred. Daniel began texting me a lot. Daniel has never been much of a texter. He's the type of person that responds with a single word or leaves your message in red for days. It was surprising to see him texting me so frequently. Initially, it was casual. "Hey, how are things going?" Or "Have you seen this humorous video?" But the chats grew longer and more personal. He'd inquire how I was doing and commend me on what I'd shared on social media. And eventually his text became flirty. I would lie if I said I wasn't excited. It seemed like all those years of unrequited feelings had finally been validated. Daniel was really noticing me. I leaned into it hard. Our conversations escalated into full-fledged flirtation. We'd engage in light-hearted banter, laugh at inside jokes, and tease one another. I was aware that we were approaching perilous area, but I ignored that small voice of caution. Around the same time, Ethan approached me with an idea. He wanted us to sell the house we had purchased and move into his parents' home. His father was ill and required a few surgeries, and his mother could use some help around the house. Furthermore, the house provided ample space for all of us. I agreed, without hesitation. Daniel still lived close and went to his parents' house frequently. I saw it as an opportunity to spend more time with him, maybe even spend some time alone together. I didn't stop to consider how wrong my motivations were. All I cared about was if this relocation would put me closer to Daniel. I hadn't found a new work since we moved back to town. My previous employer did not have a branch in this area. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I was looking for a new opportunity. Ethan had discussed assisting me in obtaining a position at his workplace, but this had yet to happen. So I was at home a lot, waiting for work leads. Daniel and I began spending more and more time together. He would come over frequently, sometimes under the guise of assisting his mother, or checking on his father. But when his mother was away, perhaps visiting a friend, or accompanying his father to a checkup, it was just the two of us at home. Ethan was at work during the day, so I took advantage of the opportunity. I grew bolder. I was testing the waters to see how far I could get. I flirted with him openly. I even admitted things that I should have kept to myself. I told him I had always had a thing on him, and that he was the one I wanted throughout these years. I've even admitted, God, I can't believe I said that I married Ethan for stability, not love. I informed Daniel that he was always the one I preferred looking back. I cannot believe how foolish I was. What was I thinking? Pouring my heart out to someone who has previously rejected me many times in the past. But in that moment, everything seemed perfect. It felt like I was finally expressing everything I had been holding back for so long. Meanwhile, Ethan sold our house quite quickly. It was as if he had a customer lined up before. He even mentioned the notion. He said he'd put the money in our savings account and utilize it for something greater later, perhaps a better house. When we were ready to start a family, I did not question it. I was too preoccupied by Daniel to worry about the specific. But once we relocated to his parents' place, I saw a shift in Ethan. He became aloof, but not blatantly cold. Cold, but there was a change in how he dealt with me. And the worst part, I didn't care, at least not initially. I was too preoccupied with Daniel to pay much attention to my husband's behavior. Daniel, on the other hand, was more active than ever. He'd show up at our house unexpectedly, and I'd tell myself it was because of me. He'd sit with me in the living room, conversing and laughing, as if we were the only two people in the world. But something seemed odd. Despite all his flirtation, Daniel never made a move. Even when I tried to push things, he refused to take the bait. He didn't openly reject me, but he always found a way to deflect, claiming we needed to get to know one another better, or that we should take things slowly. Take things slowly. We had known each other our entire lives. What else was there to know? I should have noticed the red flags. I should have noticed that something wasn't adding up. But my infatuation blinded me to what was standing in front of me. I was completely unprepared for what happened. I really wasn't. It all began only a few days before everything fell apart. I spoke with Ethan about his current job status and the vacancy at his workplace. I'd been waiting for him to recommend me, so I decided it was time to follow up. But Ethan informed me that the position had already been occupied by someone else. He promised to recommend me as soon as another position that matched my qualifications became available. It stung, but I brushed it off. I assumed it was only a temporary hiccup, and that everything would soon fall into place. However, only a few days later, everything erupted in my face. That day started off like any other. We were all homely, Ethan and Daniel. Ethan's parents were at the hospital for my father-in-law's checkup, so there were just three of us in the house. I was upset and frustrated for reasons I couldn't explain. At the moment, a part of me was annoyed that Ethan hadn't departed for work. I had hoped to have some alone time with Daniel, but Ethan's arrival was throwing a kink in my plans. I tried to keep it cool by sitting in the living room with Daniel and pretending to watch TV all the while, praying that Ethan would leave. But he did not. Instead, he stayed at home, which just irritated me. Then, when I was in the fist, out of nowhere, Ethan emerged from the bedroom with a stack of divorce papers. He stepped right up to me, handed them to me, and said, without hesitation, that I had 5 minutes to pack and leave with my belongings. I was stunned. I was taken completely by surprise. At first, I assumed it was a nasty joke or an April Fool's hoax, despite the fact that it was not April. But Ethan's expression made it plain that he was not joking. And Daniel didn't seem surprised either. In fact, he appeared unusually calm, as if he had anticipated this all along. That was what truly bothered me. I asked Ethan what the hell was going on, and he didn't hesitate to explain. He informed me that he wanted a divorce. He informed me he knew about the text with Daniel and everything I'd been doing behind his back. As if that wasn't enough, He threatened to forcibly remove me and my possessions from the house if I didn't leave. I was infuriated. How dare he? This was also my residence. Or at least it had been until that point. We started bickering, which rapidly turned into a screaming match. I accused him of being overly theatrical and blowing things out of proportion. But Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not yell back. He simply stood there, waiting for me to finish. Daniel didn't say anything. He just sat there, watching everything unfold as if he were an innocent spectator. And in that moment, I despised him for it. Eventually, I knew I couldn't win this argument. Ethan was not going to budge, and I didn't want to chance him carrying out his threat to toss me out. So I packed my bag, took what I could, and departed. Then, I went directly to my parents' place. I was furious. I'm still convinced Ethan was overreacting, and that everything would be fine in a few days. I assumed that after a period of cooling off, we'd discuss, apologize and go on. But days passed into weeks and I heard nothing from Ethan. No calls, no texts or messages. Daniel did not reach out either, which acted more than I wanted to acknowledge. That's when the gravity of the situation began to sink in. This would not go away easily. This was not a one-time fight that could be resolved with a simple apology. This was real. And the worst part, my family was no assistance. My parents and siblings did not comfort me or tell me it wasn't my fault. Instead, they were brutally honest. They told me I had created my bed, and now I needed to lie in it. They openly blamed me for what had transpired. They did not mince words about it. Hearing it from individuals who were meant to be on my side felt like a hit in the gut. That's when it struck me. I had absolutely royally screwed up. There was no maybe about it. I've wrecked my own marriage and life, and if I don't act quickly, I'll be in trouble. How can I repair this? Reddit. What can I do? Update. Hello, Reddit. Well, hey again. The first time I posted here, I had a lot to say. I received a reality check would be an understatement. The level of criticism I received was overwhelming, but I believe I needed to hear it. Everyone agreed that I was in, and I can't disagree with that. I made a huge mistake and have accepted full responsibility for my actions. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I fixed things with Ethan and that we are back together, happier and stronger than ever. But it would be a lie if anything. Things have gotten worse, and so swiftly that I can't keep up. I'd also like to clarify a couple points because I've seen the same questions or charges come up repeatedly. No, I'm not attempting to depict myself as a victim, and I'm not here to excuse my actions. I know I was mistaken. I knew it before, and I know it much more today. But I'm here to rant to share. And perhaps to digest what's happening. If you want to bash me again, that is great. I probably deserved it. Anyway, on with the update. Everything has gone absolutely out of control. I finally got in touch with Ethan after weeks of silence. It wasn't easy, and when we finally spoke, it was harsh and awful. It's soul-wrenching. First, he said, something that utterly devastated me. Daniel never wanted to flirt with me. He only interacted with me because Ethan encouraged him to do so. That realization struck me like a ton of bricks. Everything I thought I had with Daniel, every seductive text, coy grin, and lingering glance, Ethan organized it all, and why he refused to say. Perhaps it was a brutal act of vengeance. If that was his intention, he may have intended for me to be humiliated and suffer. Well, mission completed. I felt devastated, and yet a part of me remained desperate. I reached out to Daniel with hope. I hoped that maybe he'd admit that while it all started as a ruse, he had grown to like me. I expected this to be one of those cliched rom-com moments, where he admits he fell for me, despite everything. But no. Daniel didn't respond, not to the first message, not to the second or 10th. I eventually noticed he blocked me. The shame alone made me want to crawl into a hole and never come out. As if that wasn't horrible enough, I proceeded to check our joint bank account and found it almost empty. Ethan had cleared out practically everything. There is less than 5 of the money remaining in there. And legally, there's nothing I can do about it. So now, I am broke. heartbroken and jobless, quit my previous work to relocate back here with Ethan, believing it was the best decision for our family. I trusted him when he promised to assist me find a position at his company. But now, I'm almost certain the vacancy he referenced never existed. He just did not want to help me. Ethan has made it plain that he wants a divorce. He stated that he refuses to stay married to someone who is focused and obsessed with his brother. He accused me of cheating and promised that I would suffer the full repercussions of my conduct. What he said completely gutted me. He said he had known about my feelings for Daniel for years, even as children. He knew I had a crush on his brother. He explained that this was one of the reasons he waited so long to ask me out. I had no clue. He had been holding on to this for so long. I felt I'd done a good job of concealing it back then, or at least that it wasn't significant enough to draw attention. But Ethan did. He noticed everything. He told me he thought I was over Daniel by the time we started dating, and ultimately married. He had convinced himself that I had moved on from those feelings. He stated that he had believed in us. In me then came the night of his mother's birthday celebration. Ethan claims that was the moment when everything came together for him. He said he noticed how I behaved around Daniel. How hard I laughed at his jokes. I touched his arm for no reason and couldn't stop looking at him. He claimed it hit him like a ton of bricks. I realized how obsessed I still was. Hearing him mention the term obsessed was like a slap in the face. But deep inside, I know he was not mistaken. I had become obsessed in retrospect. I can see why. But hearing Ethan say it aloud made me feel guilty in ways I can't explain. Ethan went on to add that the realization I was still obsessed with his sibling devastated him. He claimed it made him feel as if our entire relationship was based on a lie, and that no matter what he did, or how much he loved me, he would always come second to Daniel. I attempted to defend myself. I told him that my feelings for Daniel were not what he expected, that things were not as serious as he made them appear. And then Ethan said something that will stay with me for a long time. He informed me that I had no idea how apparent I had been, and that I couldn't even accept it to myself. That broke me because he was correct. I had not admitted it to myself for years. I convinced myself it was a stupid crush, something from the past. But it obviously wasn't. I'm not sure how to recover from this, or even if I can. Every word Ethan uttered seemed to underline how shattered our marriage is. And what saddens me the most is that I'm finally discovering how much I genuinely adore him. But it seems too late. And to be honest, Ethan isn't the only one who is against me. Everyone as our mutual friends have taken his side. Even Daniel has turned his back on me. My family has been accommodating and allowing me to stay with them. However, they have made it obvious that they believe I am solely responsible for this catastrophe. I've scarcely eaten. I can't sleep. All I do is repeat every mistake. Bad turn. Each selfish decision that got me here. I had a marriage that others would kill for a caring, dependable partner that truly cared about me. And I tossed everything away. Ethan will not even consider couples counseling. He says there is nothing to talk about. He wants a clean split, and no one can convince him. Otherwise, I keep asking myself how things got so horrible. How did we get from being happy to this? Moving back to the city was the worst decision I'd ever made. I believed I was looking for a new chapter, a fresh start. Instead, I destroyed everything valuable to me. I'm wondering if there's really a route ahead, or if this is just my new normal. I am alone, regretful and drowning in the ruins of my own mistakes. Update. Hey Reddit. It's been a while and I've been getting messages asking for an update. But I didn't think I had anything worth updating you on until now. A few weeks ago, I was served. Yes, I was served divorce papers. Ethan is officially done with me, which I guess I knew was coming. But I was holding out hope that he'd change his mind and forgive me, or we'd figure out how to patch things up. But this is the end of the road. My marriage is unsalvageable. There is no miracle moment of forgiveness. There is no opportunity for us to rebuild. When I viewed those papers, it felt like the last nail in the coffin. It struck me all at once. He's really finished. I pushed him too far and there's no turning back. Now after that, I had to return to what used to be our home, to pack the rest of my belongings. I couldn't bear doing it alone. So I brought my siblings along to provide emotional support. I didn't have much left to pack. The majority of my stuff were already gone yet. I continued to walk into that house. The house I used to live in was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. Ethan wasn't there when which was probably a good thing. I was afraid that if I saw him, I would cry or say something I would later regret. I wanted to beg him for another chance to say something. Anything that would sway his opinion, but I knew it was meaningless. So I packed the rest of my belongings, left my keys on the counter, and walked out of the house for the final time. I am now permanently back at my parents' place, something I vowed I would never do. It's pretty ironic. I used to pride myself on my independence. I am creating a life for myself. And now I'm back in my childhood bedroom, trying to figure out how I screwed everything up. So severely, so thoroughly. I feel like a failure. It's like a walking, breathing error. I am actively looking for work, applying for anything and anything, just to get out of the house and begin saving. I can't stay here forever, as grateful as I am that my parents let me stay here. This is not where I want to be. But right now, I don't have a choice. This is not the life I had envisioned for myself. Not even close. I never thought I'd end up here. Divorced, unemployed, and living with my parents. I have everything I thought. I wanted: a loving husband, a solid house, and a promising future. And I tossed everything away. I regret everything. Every single decision that led me here. I would go back in and do everything in a heartbeat. But I can't. All I can do now is try to pick up the pieces and figure out where to go next. I wish I had a better update for you. I wish I could tell you that things are improving, or that I've reached some sort of resolution. But the truth is, I'm still in the middle of things, and I'm not sure when, or if I'll emerge out the other side. Thank you for reading. I'll post another update if there's anything worth discussing. But for now, here is where I am. Update: hello. Read. It's been a while. I took a long hiatus from this platform, and I honestly didn't know if I'd ever return. But here I am, and I think I owe you all a final update, a final chapter. If you will consider this my farewell. First things first. What about the divorce? Yes, it has been finalized. Ethan filed on the basis of infidelity, and that we live in a full state where infidelity is considered significant in divorce processes. I did not receive a single penny. There is no alimony settlement or anything, which is frankly fair. I brought this upon myself. I deserve the outcome. Fortunately, we did not have children. I have no doubt that I would have also lost custody, given the overwhelming evidence against me. Ethan presented everything. My emotional affair with his sibling, the messages, all of it. It was humiliating. But again, I brought it on myself. Following the divorce, I moved out of my parents' house and into a small apartment that I could afford with my minimum wage job. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. And for a little time, I felt I was finding my feet. But then I was fired. The boss's son despised me and wanted me out. There's also nepotism. One, just like that. I was out of a job without a job. I would be unable to keep my residence. I attempted to make ends meet, but it wasn't sufficient. I eventually lost it. I couldn't return to my parents' place. Too much pride. Too much shame. So I have been sofa-surfing ever since. Friends, acquaintances, and occasionally even strangers provide temporary shelter. It's humiliating, tiring and soul-crushing. I'm now saving all done. I can't get another flat. It is slow going in, but I'm determined to make it work. I do not want to rely on anyone longer. I want my own place again, even if it's a little studio. I wish I could sit here and tell you that things are better, that I have turned my life around and discovered happiness. But I would be lying. The truth is that I'm just existing, surviving day by day. Some days, I'm not sure what I'm surviving for. I really miss Ethan. I continuously think about him. I reflect on the life we had, The love we shared and how I wrecked it all. I think of how he used to look at me, as if I were the most important person in the world. To him, I remember his voice, his laugh, and the way he held me, when everything seemed to be falling apart. I'd give anything to go back and touch him once more, to have one more chat in which he looked at me with love, rather than hate, and to hear him utter my name, the way he used to when we were together. But that isn't my reality anymore. He's moved on, and I'm stuck in the mess I created. And I do not blame him. He deserved more than what I offered him. So that's where I am. Just surviving. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm hoping to find a way to be okay someday. For now, this is my farewell. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.